In my last video, I talked about Charles Barkley profiting off working for a shady company. And while working for a company with loose morals is an interesting dilemma, it doesn't apply to many of us. However, we do shop and participate in mass consumerism. In recent decades, there has been a push to make mass consumerism more ethical, and for us to become more aware of the moral implications of what we buy and how it affects others. In this video, I'll talk about what ethical consumerism is and what it attempts to achieve, but also the many problems with it. The main idea of ethical consumerism is about choosing ethically sourced goods. The idea is that when enough people buy stuff in an ethical way, companies take notice and address their supply chains and actions. Proponents of ethical consumerism want us to shop locally, buy from secondhand stores, and eat sustainably. There has been a recent push to create more transparency about the practices of these companies. Bloomberg created an ESG score, which gives us thousands of companies a score based on their environmental, social, and governance efforts. Additionally, a lot of labels have been added to products to show where stuff comes from. Examples of this are the Fair Trade label, which is given to companies who give benefits to their producers, like cocoa bean farmers for coffee or for grass-fed beef. There are 5 main concerns for ethical consumers. 1 is the environment. This is usually in regards to nuclear waste, climate change, and pollution. 2nd is people, as in human rights, child labor, and supply chain policies. 3rdly, animals and animal testing. 4th, politics. This has to do with political views of corporations. And finally, product sustainability. In theory, all of this sounds great and righteous, but there are problems. The first and most outspoken issue is that our individual buying habits are unlikely to cause any major change. Companies are unlikely to attempt and pursue any sort of moral high ground if consumers won't reward them for it. It is inherently against capitalism. In a 2010 Wall Street Journal article, The Case Against Corporate Social Responsibility, it discusses how what's best for society means sacrificing profits. It continues that the tenet that companies will profit more for being ethical is absurd. Many companies have small margins as it is, and while government regulation might be more effective, it certainly isn't going to happen. In politics, money talks. Instead, politicians and the media will shift the blame on the individual consumer in our moral dilemmas, rather than the very large corporations who perpetuate the cycle. Secondly, we are marketizing ethics. With ethical consumerism, we are pushing our upper middle class economic morals on the entire world economy. The major concern with that is that ethical production of goods makes them more expensive. While upper and middle class Westerners can afford the increase, many people around the world and even locally can't. Many people are just trying to survive and provide for their families. Especially with inflation, people can't pay even more. Thirdly, everybody deciding to be ethical could have the opposite effects. For example, look at child labor. Western parents obviously oppose it as they can't imagine their child working in sweatshops, but a boycott of a company who does that could cause them to cut back on employees and get rid of their child laborers. From the loss of the child labor, that family could be losing a source of much needed income. Fourthly, ethical consumerism causes a social slippery slope and ambiguity. What is the line exactly? Sure, it makes sense that we can pressure companies to treat animals better. Can we also pressure pharmacies to not sell Plan B? Or get bookstores to ban books we deem unethical? Ethical consumerism can become a form of vigilantism, where self-appointed ethical consumers force their ideas on everybody. Furthermore, there's ambiguity among how ethical a consumer needs to be. Do ethical consumers want people to be vegetarian or vegan? How much electricity can they use in their house? What is the line? The same goes in relation to politics. You might not eat at a Chick-fil-A or buy Nike, but where does it stop? There is no line, so the whole premise is ambiguous and usually inconsistent by nature. And finally, the problem of economic polarization. In the last decade, it has become problematic for companies to stay neutral. Both liberals and conservatives want large corporations to take stands for the politics each of them think is right. One example of this is Pride Month. In June, companies will create rainbow logos and present themselves as LGBTQ allies. But the problem is political stands polarize the economy. A poll was done that said that 47% of Americans wouldn't buy from companies whose political views differ from their own. Now, it's one thing to vote with your wallet, but if 50% of Americans won't buy from a store because of politics, that's a problem. There are no easy fixes to all of these issues. However, there certainly is some optimism. Americans gave almost $500 billion to charity last year, so they surely are ethically minded. Additionally, better marketing for ethical products go a long way. Electric cars could be shown as cheaper and more convenient with the rise of gas prices, and organic food can be painted as a healthy alternative. Even though it looks bad, we still have a responsibility to try and figure it out. So, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and I hope you guys have a great day.